Good morning. Welcome back to the Higher Grounds podcast. This is your morning minute meditation for this morning. Trust and hope you've had a great day this morning. And I want to read a few verses out of 1 John chapter 2 for you this morning. And I give you a little thought that's on my heart today. I've been going through the book of 1 John chapter number 2 at the church on Sunday morning. And if my memory serves me correctly, I've preached 5 messages out of the first, I think 11 or 12 verses here in the book of 1 John chapter number 2. And matter of fact, first 17 verses, And so we preached about 5 messages, and we've been dealing with the faith and the fellowship of the family, how John the Beloved is dealing with the people of God. And he deals with several different areas, evidence of salvation, things of that nature, deals with sonship, fellowship. And he tells the believer how to deal with sin in their life. Chapter number 1 talks about confessing and cleansing their sins. Here the chapter number 2 deals with the believer conquering their sins. Of course, we do know that the believer is not going to live a sinless life. We don't believe in sinless perfection, but we believe as a child of God we should strive to sin less. And so John the Beloved is dealing with the believers on how to deal with sin in their life. And there's 4 or 5 points I've dealt with. I just want to give you the first 2 verses this morning. Just something to chew on today, just something you think about on this day. 1 John chapter number 2, verse number 1, my little children, these things write I unto you, that ye sin not. And if any man sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. And so he's dealing with sin in the life of the believer. Of course, you do know there's going to be sin in your life. We're still living in the flesh. The flesh is not yet eradicated. And so John's telling these saved people how to deal with sin that arises in their life. And so he begins to encourage them, speak to them as little children. That means this as a teacher would speak to their pupils or a parent would speak to their children. So he said, my little children. So he begins to educate them. Then he moves on from education to encouragement. So he begins to talk about why he's writing these things. He said, these things I write unto you. And so he begins to explain what he's doing. So he said that you sin not. There's the prohibition of sin. He begins to tell them, try to discourage them from sin in their life. And we have so much we could say about sin in life. I believe some people just expect to sin. Some people just entertain sin. Some people just excuse sin in their life. And so he begins to deal with those in the life of the believer. Then there's the possibility of sin. If any man sin. In other words, he's letting us know, as long as you live in the flesh, you have the potential in your flesh to sin and to get off into sin. And then he moves from that to the provision of sin. In other words, those who have sin in their life, he begins to deal with that. He said, if you sin, you're going to sin. He says, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. And so we begin to look at our advocate. There's the advocate of our salvation. Jesus is our personal advocate. He used the terminology we. Jesus is our present advocate we have. He's our pleading advocate. He's with the Father. He's advocating, interceding with the Father. And so John the Beloved begins to deal with these areas. And he said, finally and fourthly, I'm done. He said, Jesus, our perfect advocate. He said, Jesus Christ the righteous. Jesus is sinless and he is suitable to be our advocate of our salvation. Think on these things.